to our webinar today entitled What is the Telco's Right to Play in Sovereign AI, that we're running in conjunction with Red Hat. I'm delighted to have you here today, and hopefully we'll present you with some interesting perspectives over the next hour. Just in terms of the process we'll run through, I'll do a little bit of an introduction, then I'll hand over to Joe, who'll have a short presentation from STL, then to Abhishek, who will present a perspective on this from Tech Mahindra, and then we'll have around half an hour for panel discussion and questions from you. I have some myself, but would love to hear your perspective as well, and we'll look to get you away before 4 o'clock so you can get onto your next meetings. So in terms of just a little bit of introduction, hopefully the platform here is not too difficult to find your way around. You can see on the right a orange button which may be will open and close the menu there for you. You are in listen-only mode, but what we would encourage you is to ask questions that come to you, either questions you already have or questions that are in response to the presentations you hear. You can do that by clicking on the questions button, typing your question, and I will endeavor to ask that question. If I can't get to all the questions, fear not, we will distribute those to the panelists and presenters today, and we'll get back to you with a written answer and distribute that along with the presentation, and there will be a recording of today's webinar as well, so you can distribute that to friends, family, and colleagues afterwards. So just a quick on who we have today. My name is Chris Barraclough. I'm, as you probably realize, the kind of master of ceremonies. My colleague Joe, principal consultant and data center leader at STL, will present on his perspective on AI sovereignty. Then I'll hand over to Abhishek, the global head of network services at Tech Mahindra, and we'll be joined too by Aviv Goeta, Chief Architect for Telecommunications and CTO Office at Red Hat, who will join us for the panel discussion. So wonderful group of people, high caliber, and without further ado, I will hand over to Joe to kick us off.
That's great. Thank you very much, Chris. I'm looking forward to get into this very exciting topic. So to get started then, I think it's always good to level set on what we're talking about in today's webinar, and obviously we're focused here on sovereign AI and the sovereign AI opportunity for telcos. So how do we define sovereign AI at STL? So we define sovereign AI as a nation's independent control over its AI systems, data, and infrastructure. And well, what do we really mean by that? Well, systems encapsulates the technical skills, the software, the platforms, and to an extent the hardware as well that govern these AI systems that these AI systems run on. Obviously, AI is also nothing without data, and there's very strict data compliance regulations across the world. Obviously, there's nuances to those in different markets, but it's very much a consistent theme across markets that there is data sovereignty regulation and strict data controls. And then there's also the infrastructure that underpins all of this. And we've seen the global data center and AI boom really taking shape in the last couple of years. Lots of discussion about to what extent this is a bubble and whether this is a bubble, but there is fundamental revenue from the inference, which is already being driven by the hyperscalers. And we expect to see that continue, albeit there may be some market correction at some point, but definitely long-term a growth area for the global economy. What's the role of telcos within this sovereign AI market opportunity? Well, we've seen a real increase at STL in sovereign AI solutions being announced by telcos, and partly this is a question of framing, of course, of their solutions which are being brought to market, but also this is definitely evidence of solution development within CSPs of solutions targeting that sovereign AI opportunity. Now, obviously, there's a bit of an inflection point possibly there with some of Trump's tariffs coming into play that has increased the attractiveness of sovereign and domestic solutions within the AI sphere and in many other industries as well. And in particular, we've seen a focus on providing AI infrastructure from telcos. And obviously, this is the space which is most integral to have sovereignty within your AI solutions. It's very hard to say in the model space, you can take a kind of open source model, tweak it, repurpose it, and feel like you have control over that model that you've taken from an open source provider. And Meta Llama would be a good example of that one, which has been used in sovereign AI solutions across the world. But infrastructure, you do ultimately have to build within your own domestic market, and there's significant skills, capabilities, and investment required to build up that infrastructure across markets across the world. So where have we been seeing telcos investing in this CSP sovereign AI opportunity? Well, really it's been global. Now, there's a couple of regions which I would particularly call out here. We've seen some of the work that Bell and Telus have done in Canada being quite early movers from relatively early in 2024, I would say, in terms of going after the AI factory opportunity. And we see proximity to the US being kind of playing a role in that. We've obviously seen the US Cloud Act, and that's much talked about within the sovereign AI conversation. And I guess it exposes the vulnerability of having foreign actors potentially having a route into sovereign AI solutions. We also see a range of solutions within Europe, and the European Commission has played a leading role in pushing the sovereign AI narrative. At STL, we're doing work with the European Commission to understand the rise in AI capacity required, or AI enabling data center capacity required, both across those centralized AI compute hubs, but also looking at more of the edge facilities to enable the inference for metro areas. And there's a slightly different narrative looking at more of the APAC region as well, whereby some of these countries are torn between solutions from different geopolitical partners and are looking at developing their own solutions to circumvent a reliance on other partners, considering the wider geopolitical narrative in the world at the moment. There's also an aspect of a lot of the telcos within APAC having larger roles as data center providers. You see the likes of NTT with large data center arm and other providers within that region who have a more natural route into AI infrastructure. Now, we've mentioned a wide range of different AI opportunities, and it's a very broad and complex ecosystem. So what we wanted to do in this webinar is try and take you through what some of those opportunities look like for telcos, and what are some of the areas that telcos can play in, can't play in, and would be better off partnering with other providers in to bring solutions to market. Now, really, we view the AI value chain in 7 tiers. If we start at the bottom with the infrastructure, what we see there is obviously data centers are integral to underpinning AI workloads, and they have their own dependencies on power generation, they have their own dependencies on cooling, and obviously the interconnect networks which connect up the fabric of these data centers to bring AI solutions to market and to consumers and enterprises. Hosted within those data centers, there's obviously an increasingly complex and dynamic hardware market. We see NVIDIA dominating this space, most valuable company in the world, as I'm sure you all know, but there is a wide range of other challenger providers to their GPUs, and the hyperscalers are investing in their own ASICs, their own chips, to enable inference-specific workloads. You have providers such as Grok with a Q, that is, investing in their own integrated racks and their own integrated LPUs within them. So there's a lot of innovation at this hardware layer as well. NVIDIA has been a key partner in a lot of the sovereign AI conversations, and they're very open to partnerships across the ecosystem, but they are not the only possible partner in that kind of accelerator and XPU tier. We then have the platform layer, and this is more around the infrastructure management side of things, but going up, you also have platforms around models, around AI, and around data, and these are all very interconnected and growing in complexity as 3 tiers of this value chain. And then ultimately, all of this kind of background work is really underpinning the software and services which are realizing value for enterprises and consumers. And this is where a lot of the largest gains can be made and largest revenue opportunities lie. But there's a lot of complexity required throughout the value chain and underpinning that to bring those solutions to market. And there's a lot of different roles that telcos are trying to play across this value chain as well. So why don't we have a look at some of the examples of where telcos are playing at different parts of the value chain. And really, there are telcos looking at all layers of the value chain. So you've got the likes of Deutsche Telekom. they've invested significant capital into an AI factory, over 1 billion euros for 10,000 plus GPUs to try and bring that infrastructure management under their own control and realize the returns associated with that infrastructure management. You've got BT, who are looking at a NASified global fabric with their kind of interconnect product. So two different approaches to the infrastructure layer, DT more on the compute side and BT more on the connectivity side. They're not necessarily independent, but they are both interesting examples for telcos to go after, especially with the infrastructure background and the infraco background that many telcos have. But there's a wide range of different telcos. You've got Singtel with GPU as a service, Orange and the likes of Fastweb looking at Fastweb in particular, looking at content localization. You've got Swisscom, which was definitely an early mover in terms of some of the data layer work required around the sovereign AI opportunity. EAND have been interesting in terms of some of their partnerships to deliver vertical applications to their domestic market that are leveraging AI. And Telefonica Tech are just one example of one of the many telcos that have services arms, and there's going to be significant professional services input required to allow enterprises to realize value from their AI investments. There's a lot of change management and operating model change, which is going to be required for enterprises to realize value from AI, and certain telcos are well positioned to capture a proportion of that value. However, I think it's also really important to say that telcos are not the only companies taking on this opportunity. There's a wide range of different companies across the value chain who are also going to be key beneficiaries of the sovereign AI opportunity and are partnering both with each other and with CSPs to realize benefits and revenues from this sovereign AI opportunity. I'm sure you're familiar with many of the companies across this value chain. Just to call out, they're all potential partners for CSPs, but also for potential competitors as well. And we've spoken a lot in the past around hyperscaler competition across this value chain. And now with AI, that kind of complexity and competition is only going to increase, and it requires a very strict and proactive partnership strategy for CSPs to get this right, to get this ecosystem right. A couple of companies that I think have done a very good job of partnering across the ecosystem over the last couple of years. One would be Orange. Now, they benefit from, I would say, a very favorable market. France has been, from a regulatory and investment standpoint, one of the leading European markets at attacking the AI opportunity. They have in Mistral a foundational model developer within their country. Basically, apart from China and the US, they're one of the only countries that can say that. But they've been proactive in partnering not just with individuals like Mistral, but also in combination with many other providers. So partnering with ServiceNow, Splunk, Sienna, and CGS to evolve their digital transformation offerings within the Orange business unit, for example. And I think we're going to see an increase in these multi-vendor, 3, 4, 5 different vendor partnerships in the sovereign AI space, because to compete with the scale of the hyperscalers and the complexity of the hyperscalers requires capabilities, skills, and infrastructure from many different parties that each bring something different to the table. The other example to call out with Orange is their partnership with the Ederac Group. So another way that partnerships can be very valuable is looking to expand to new markets and realize revenue in new markets. And I think Orange's partnership with the Ederac Group is a good example of that. Also wanted to call out some of the work that STC have been doing in this space. I think this is another very interesting case study. You can see through their partnership with Sambanova, looking at the sovereign AI cloud opportunity through their STC AI brand, initially running Metalama as an open source model, but looking to expand. Another thing that they are doing through their Center 3 subsidiary is partnering with Humane. Humane have a significant PIF investment behind them to deliver 6.6 gigawatts of data center capacity in the kingdom by 2035. And STC, through the Center 3 subsidiary, were announced last month as being a preferred connectivity partner with Humane. And that's nothing to be sniffed at. It obviously is an opportunity that sits very much within an individual box here. But there's a significant opportunity to be realized in partnering with a particularly large company like Humane within that space. I also like these two examples because they show the value of betting on multiple approaches from across the STC group. You don't need to go all in on a single opportunity that you want to bet on. It's better to hedge your bets if there are several opportunities within your market that appear attractive. So in terms of 3 key takeaways that STL has for telcos evaluating their sovereign AI opportunity, the first one is, it seems intuitive, but it's to build sovereign AI products and propositions to meet future customer demand. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in the hype of specific solutions, specific services such as GPU as a service. But in reality, you need to look at a whole range of different factors and evaluate which opportunities will likely present you with the largest kind of revenue and ROI story out of the different opportunities across that wide and varied AI value chain. The first thing to call out here is every market is obviously different. There's different maturity levels around your competitors, your customers, your partners, the enabling infrastructure, both from yourselves and from others within the domestic market, the regulatory impact and the kind of variance in the regulatory impact, how stable the market is, and enterprise readiness is a huge factor for AI adoption. That market view also needs to be complemented with a robust understanding of what competitive advantages your business has, both in terms of the infrastructure you have, your existing customer base, your local language expertise, your skills and capabilities, your existing partnerships. There's a whole range of different factors to be considered there. And then in terms of your go-to-market and your propositions, there's a range of different industries. And again, these will vary by market, for whom verticalized solutions will be the most attractive approach for them. And they will need those solutions to be brought to market by potentially CSPs with partners, maybe partners that are SIs within that specific country, with kind of expertise within that industry, as well as other partners across the value chain to enable that. And that really brings me on to my second key recommendation, which is around being proactive in that partnership building. As I've mentioned a couple of times now, there is such complexity within each individual box within this value chain. This is such an oversimplification of the wider complexity to realize, to kind of bring AI solutions to market. And telcos really need to be strategic and proactive in identifying which market opportunities they want to go after and which partners, given their market conditions, given their skills, are the best partners to go to market with. You know, identifying where CSPs have capability gaps or infrastructure gaps to go after specific products and services that they want to realize a value opportunity against. They need to be proactive in identifying the right partners to partner with to go after those. And I think don't be, you know, it's easy to be reactive to inbound partnership opportunities. There's a lot of companies that are going after this sovereign AI opportunity, and it's a very kind of bullish industry at the moment. But don't be dictated in your priorities by inbound partnership requests. Be proactive and be the ones directing those partnerships. And the last thing to call out is agility. There's a real need to be agile and to accelerate time to market with these solutions. If we look at the agility side of things, this is very much a market which is being driven by agile software development. You look at the different models being produced in kind of 6-monthly increments, if not quicker. Google Gemini 3 launched last week and set a new benchmark for LLM performance, kind of outpacing OpenAI. You've got Anthropic in the mix, you've got Meta Llama, you've got Mistral, who we mentioned earlier. There are obviously others which I haven't mentioned. And the kind of rate of progress, the rate of innovation with this industry is such that the leaders will change almost day by day. So it's really important to be agile in both what market opportunities you're going after, but also which partners you're choosing to partner with within an industry, and making sure that you don't just stick to a strategy and stay with it for 2 years, 3 years, because that's not going to work in the AI era. You need to be more reactive, but still proactive in being reactive to market opportunities. And I've touched on this, but accelerating your time to market as well. Consumers and enterprises are used to ChatGPT and other AI tools being iterated on kind of 3-monthly, 6-monthly cycles. It's not a 2-year product cycle. This needs to be tight and getting consumer feedback or enterprise feedback as quickly as possible, leveraging proof of concepts, betas, trials, demos, etc., to really make sure that you're accelerating your journey to the best solution that you can create. And consumers and enterprises are excited by AI. They want to be on that journey with you. So it's definitely important to engage where possible and accelerate that development velocity where you can. So that's it from the SDL side. I'm now going to hand over to Abhishek from Tech Mahindra, who's going to walk through their presentation.
Thank you so much, Joe. Really interesting. Let's move to the next slide quickly. I think from where Joe has left off, I wanted to kind of continue from that segue. So essentially, Tech Mahindra, I'm sure a lot of you are aware, is one of the largest GSIs in the world. And what I'm extremely proud of is that I lead a business unit within Tech Mahindra, which is called Network Services. We're actually the largest independent GSI on network services across the world outside of OEMs. We essentially compete more with the OEMs, and at times we end up collaborating as well as solving problems both towards the telcos and the enterprises behind the OEMs as well. We are not a product company, but essentially the way to look at it is that we are a people organization which works on partners to build our practice capabilities and our portfolio on solution and life cycle of services to go across and render as much of what we can automate or elevate with the platforms, which are open source platforms that we've developed with a lot of partners like Red Hat as well. And I'll go into a little bit of double click on that shortly. But essentially, what do we deliver? We essentially deliver the entire life cycle of solutions and services to ensure that our people are more productive and the performance that we give for each of our customers is actually an experience for delight at the end of the day for the customers and the customers of the customers. Now, from where Joe was correctly pointing out, right? And let me go across and give you headlines because we'll run out of time otherwise. So from the entire life cycle of the right-hand side, which is essentially the same image that Joe was sharing, if you were to look at the infrastructure, hardware, platform, model, AI, data, software, services, Tech Mahindra obviously has, like I said, the people, platform, practices, and portfolio across the length and breadth of each of the modules as well as each of the verticals. But beyond that, especially with AI, the demand drivers that we are seeing, and kind of aligning with what Joe was also mentioning in the previous one, building sovereign AI products as well as propositions in our lens is actually going across and building as many of the solutions as possible. And I'm sure quite a few of you, in case you follow Tech Mahindra, would already be able to go across and Google that we've basically developed Indus as well as Garuda. Garuda is something that we're extremely proud for Indonesia as a dialect of almost 1.2 billion LLM that we've developed in the local dialect language. So Garuda is essentially going across and enhancing everything that would be sovereign LLM for in Bahasa and the dialects of Bahasa for Indonesia. So evolving more and more of those product portfolios as well as going across and helping telcos or customers otherwise in each of the layers across infrastructure, hardware, platform, model, data, software, services, and use cases beyond, which actually will cut across. Now, building those agents for consumption of three aspects primarily, and that's actually the bucketing of the demand drivers that you'll see on the left-hand side. The compelling drivers that we've been noticing are one from a sovereignty of consumption, which is anything that requires to consume the privacy of the data, and that data could be one, the end customer data, as well as the secure data of the infrastructure of the telecom consumers or the providers itself. An example being that essentially everything that you've got to build on your autonomous network journey, and I'm sure the ones that follow TM Forum understand what I'm saying, requires for you to go across and build use cases for consumption of the operations team of the telco providers themselves. And in essence, go across and one, resolve their own network operation related problems, as well as go across and also ensure that the data privacy of their end consumers is not going across and being actually sacrificed. That is one of the key drivers that we've already seen in the last couple of years in going across and building use cases that have been very useful. And I'll probably double click on a few of them as we move in the next slides. But the AI model control of how you are differentiating on going across and solving that problem on the path of autonomous network operations, as well as what you're going to deliver as experiences for your end customers, is essentially again where it's a hip to thigh to the data localization and the sovereign security that you require for whatever resides on your infrastructure. And that essentially, to the point that Joe was also making, a partner or a customer like Orange has already gone on that path in Europe, and they're going across and ensuring that the sovereign data is intact on their platforms, while they may be still going across and partnering like all the other telcos are with hyperscalers. But there's more on this kind of a trend of going across and ensuring that each of the telcos will create their own sovereign clouds than only limit themselves in going across and having collaborations. Edge is actually a very interesting part, and especially if you were to assume that radio is a part of one of the use case drivers or compelling drivers to be consumed by telcos on the edge, along with as much as you're seeing as, I would say, real-time use cases. So anything that is ultra low latency, high throughput, network availability with security of your data at the edge are use cases which are going across and generating now the demand of a lot of AI to be actually hosted at the edge to ensure your ultra low latency real-time use cases. Non-real-time can still happen on the cloud, but the real-time, and let's take an example of any use case which is biometric driven to go across and render and deliver an experience which is real-time, is essentially going to shift more and more as use cases which will be demanded at the edge with AI. Regulatory, to me, is hip to thigh to the data localization point that we were making. Again, GDPR, DPDP are the more popular ones. Every single government as well as localized entities are going or are already moving towards imposing more and more regulatory demands. And like I was mentioning in one of my previous informations, that security and assurance for leveraging as much on being the consumers or the telcos being the consumers of that themselves, a lot has already pivoted towards AI ops and autonomous networks as a driving force of that, so that they can go across and render bigger and better experiences towards their customers with lower cost, as well as use cases that can actually go across and become more and more intuitive. A few of the examples, and I think I'll not be able to go into the details, but network optimization. So a lot is actually moving towards our apps, and that also getting democratized, that you don't necessarily need to have only the OEMs or the SIs going across and building new powered R apps, because the architecture is already opened up. Similarly, fraud detection on the data that is already there, synthetic data actually being driven from the CDRs to go across and give certain use cases of experiences that can prevent fraud prior to them happening. And obviously, everything at the heart and center remains the customer experience. And more demand driving on AI use cases is increasing for all the telcos trying to go across and monetize as well as elevate their experience while leveraging the sovereignty of the data that only they should be consuming and that should not get exposed to the end customer. So if it is to go across and give ABC customer a new experience on, let's say, a package on a sports and entertainment, because they know that they are actually demanding that, is something that are now going to be intuitive AI agents, which will go across and start interfacing and interacting with the consumers and going across and actually teasing them to go across and make them monetize more. But more on that later. Let's go to the next slide, please. And I think, again, I'll keep it short on this one, but Red Hat and Tech Mahindra, the way we've been serving our end customers, essentially across the life cycle of the solutions and services, is what we've kind of depicted. The gray where the others are primarily what the telcos or our end customers end up purchasing themselves, or going across and having the hold and the remit on that being their responsibility. When it is coming to everything that has to be built across, let's say, services on ITSM, billing, customer portals, monitoring, like I mentioned, of managed services, autonomous network operations, backup, replication, automations that actually get triggered through Ansible, either on playbooks or what we end up tuning, so on and so forth, right? So the entire layers of everything that you were seeing in the previous slides is essentially reconstructed in the open architecture that we end up going across and delivering as a life cycle of solutions and services from a sovereign AI stack. Now, how and where have we done it? Let's go to the next slide quickly, please. Having done that, and I think one of the aspects that is very, very interesting in I would say the elevation of AI now going across and becoming front and center. The good news, or sovereign cloud as well. The good news is that the sovereignty for cloud by the telcos is something that was done by default by them on at least the telco cloud part. And that's been a journey that is extremely mature. Now we are pivoting towards how do you go across and collapse your telco cloud and your IT cloud, becoming a composite single sovereign cloud is basically the journey and the conversations, as well as a few touch points that we are going across and engaging with most of the telcos across the world. Now, what have we done in the past? I'm just giving you a glimpse. Whether it was drivers, and the drivers remain pretty much the same from what the telcos are trying to achieve with the sovereign cloud scenarios. Whether it is simplification or modernization or monetization, the drivers have been pretty much the same from a business lens. Now, whether it was Digicel, where again, in an open architecture, when you are trying to go across and ensure that the data remains sovereign, the differentiation on how you will harness, as well as go across and consume that data to go across and either be the consumer of those use cases yourselves for a better operation or a better experience towards your customers, or looking towards the lens of how do you go across and evolve new monetization of newer use cases that can actually be driven by AI, or in the past by different capabilities that were being rendered on just on data. Or the third scenario where you're going across and saying, let's democratize and go across and do value-added services for everything that somebody can be consuming via the internet pipe that we've opened, or the connectivity pipe that we've opened, to go across and say that why, how, and why can actually be it's served by the telco better than actually open market. That's pretty much been the theme over the years, and that theme is not changing too much. However, I would say the elevation or the expansion of the way the telco sovereign clouds were built is now the same mentality with which open architecture is evolving for everything surrounding. Now, I'll probably pause for maybe questions later on where we can go into the details, but headlines, whether it is working with the Telefonicas or the Digicels or the Telstras or the Proximus and beyond, Dish, etc. One of the interesting ones where we have recently developed a LLM which is actually based on Llama 3.1 is actually what we are doing for the German operator, which is there on the slide, which is actually going across and getting consumed for a use case on ensuring that you have both a better change management as well as pretty much your dispatch advisory services, right? So reducing the truck rolls for the operations team to ensure that they get it first time right, as well as the change management conflicts. And that was a very interesting statistic that we ended up going across and realizing 70 to 80% of the outages that have been happening are actually because there are parallel change managements happening for the telcos themselves. So we built use cases on LLMs which are now going across and being intuitive, and you don't need manual intervention, but rather you're actually getting a very first time right advice itself that why don't you change this change management requirement from day 0 to day 1, because you already have a change management happening on fiber. Please don't go across and have a change management for a site where the radio transport is also going down. Now those kind of conflicts is what we've already built, the LLMs which are being consumed now by the operators. That's just an example. I'll pause now and I'll hand it over back to Joe.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. If we pop cameras on, we'll bring Joe back. I think he's going to join us for the panel discussion. And if you've got further questions, please do pump them into the questions box there, and I'll endeavour to ask them. I just want to kick off by introducing Aviv Goeta from Red Hat. Maybe you could do that yourself, Aviv, and talk a little bit about your role, and then where AI sovereignty fits into that. I'm not picking you up. I don't know. Is anybody else? Is it me?
I also can't hear. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I was on mute. New platform for me. Yeah.
We're all learning about platforms.
Yeah, I can talk about it for hours. Yeah, I'm a chief architect at Red Hat, part of the telco CTO team at Red Hat, telco CTO office. We are something like 7-8 people, veterans of the telco industry. We take care of, let's say, I can separate it to 3 topics. One is looking ahead, where telco industry is going, looking at future use cases, like 6G, for example, and maybe other things which are not typical, let's say. Second is communicating with the field. When it comes to the field, I'm talking about partner, customers, and the Red Hat field. And the third thing is participating in communities, like telco-related communities that are relevant for Red Hat. So we think it's relevant for us, and it's, this is what Red Hat is doing in general, participating and developing software in communities, open source. And the sovereignty or sovereign AI is a very interesting topic for us. As an open source company, we develop only open source, and especially around the telco topic. So if you want, I can talk about the telcos or wait for the next question.
Well, I think what would be interesting is, obviously we touched a little bit on some of the drivers for sovereign AI. Obviously some of that is the recent geopolitics more generally that we're starting to see. The other is the importance of compute more, generally, and obviously AI has accelerated that. I guess, are there other things that you see driving sovereign AI, any factors that haven't been mentioned? And maybe more importantly, looking forward, how do you see the landscape relating to sovereign AI changing, either on the supply side or on the demand side or on regulation? What kind of things should we be looking out for? And thinking about skating to where the puck is going, what do we need to be aware of?
There are a few angles I can look at from the, let's say, telco ecosystem or even 3GPP point of view. If you remember, there is the network API discussion, and the way we look at that is the opportunity for telcos to create an ecosystems of APIs that will be consumed by developers. It can be enterprises, it can be sole developers, and it can be maybe other companies to create services around APIs. And that thing started from 3GPP, but we saw it took time until that thing created, companies started to create solutions around it. Okay, so in the case of AI, it's coming from a different angle because the use case, the whole idea of AI is already here. It's not something that you need to develop from scratch. And telcos are very well positioned when it comes to sovereign AI. They have the connection, not the connection, they have the tick in the box, all the boxes when it comes to compliance and regulation. Second thing is about the network. Big states, you have low latency and the ability to provide infrastructure. And I'm talking about infrastructure, it's edge, it's data centers, GPUs, GPU as a service, models as a service, and even going deeper into localized models, national models, things that models that you would like to use with very specific national data, or even it can be in other areas like banking and things like that. you can't expose the data to other, let's say, for example, hyperscalers, or even it will take more time for companies that are not multinational like the hyperscalers, but it'd be more challenging to expose the data to them.
Maybe a couple of things that I'd add just in terms of things to watch out for over the next few years. I mean, this has been said many times before, but we're shifting from training to inferencing, and there's going to be an increase in kind of workloads being distributed across facilities near metro areas, and there's going to be a rise in build of data centers adjacent to within 25 kilometers or so of metro areas to enable that lower latency inference. And to be honest, the economics work out better than hosting the inference workloads in these large hyperscale campuses far away from metro areas, which is being done for power availability and cost for AI training. The other thing that I think is particularly interesting is the shift in the ecosystem. Now, we've all known about the neoclouds, right? It's a whole group of new companies that are suddenly integral to the AI ecosystem that have really been born out of either new ventures or pivots from crypto mining firms. And they've risen to be a very large player within this AI ecosystem. And I see that changing. They won't be the only group of companies that really benefit from this AI shift that we're going through at the moment. If you think about the companies that are going to be surfacing agentic applications to enterprises, to consumers, some of those will be companies like Salesforce, which we all use or use one of their competitors today. But there's going to be new companies on the block with new use cases that aren't just building on existing software applications. And that's true both at the software layer, and that's where it's most easily conceptual, but that's true at the platform layer and elsewhere in the value chain as well. So I think definitely there's a role for telcos in needing to be very proactive, as I mentioned before, in the partnership space, both in terms of shifts across their existing partnership ecosystem, but also looking for these new companies that are coming into the ecosystem and understanding how they are either competing, partnering, or consuming their services.
That makes sense. Abhishek, anything to add?
I think from a services lens, if I was to just append and add to what Aviv and Joe have been talking about, I think what I think we are extremely excited about is solving the problem that AI is getting democratized, right? So it's not when you've built an open architecture, everything now needs to be democratized, that external as well as internal should be able to go across and evolve newer and newer AI driven use cases, which now will have to go across and work in context awareness, as well as not have hallucinations. The data should not get infringed, sovereignty should remain, security should remain, and it should not be misused, right? If we were to look at that entire problem statement, and on top of that, the biggest issue which will come across is that how do you ensure that you take the journey of building something which is limitless? So you've got to go across and solve a lot of these problems while going across and saying energy consumption, and if you are creating something which is limitless, it has to be sovereign. And now you've got to also go across and keep in mind that it should not get broken at the edge or at the cloud, and the interspersing of every single experience going across and doing cloud to edge as well as edge to cloud requires the most reliable network, as well as the capability to go across and evolve as much from, like I said, a democratization standpoint, right? All those problems are music to somebody who's actually managing services, because going across and solving all these new problems is where we are extremely excited to go across and say, how much can I go across and standardize or regulate with platform providers as well as open architecture providers like a Red Hat, and then go across and serve all of these skill and capabilities that the telcos or any end consumer requires to go across and evolve in a cost-effective manner. So that's something which is the underpinning of all these variety of demands, which will now explode, because we've got to be ready for limitless capabilities on hardware, energy, as well as the use cases which should be trained context aware and not having hallucinations. So that's the exciting part we all should be excited about.
That's really interesting. And I think, you know, what Joe put up and demonstrated, there are lots of different players operating across the value chain and participating in that. I guess we've got a couple of questions that ultimately, to deliver something effective needs significant capital investment across that value chain. And feel free to reference the Cloud Act and other things. Why are hyperscalers not automatically going to win this? Why are they not going to be the providers of sovereign solutions? Why is there an opportunity for other players to participate here? I think is a key question that a couple of people are focused on.
Why don't you go ahead?
I will start. So you read the news. So from a geopolitical point of view, I think every state already, or I can't quote, but high percentage of them already started to build a strategy around infrastructure and AI infrastructure in order to avoid situations where they can jeopardize data and they can jeopardize their infrastructure. So when you rely, the whole idea of sovereignty is to rely the least, the minimum, let's say, on external suppliers. So that in order to achieve that, they will have to build something internally. So this is something that hyperscalers can't provide because at the end they are dependent on their home states, let's say, US, and this is something which is very, very challenging to answer because the geopolitical landscape is changing very fast, and sometimes it's very challenging to. You can't provide an answer by one night or for one case. Does it make sense?
And I think I can probably be a bit blunter here, which is, hyperscalers have got the capital to be able to do all of this. The reality is, with the Cloud Act in the US, there is a risk, regardless of where they are placing data, regardless where the infrastructure is, that data can be made available, should be, or has to legally be made available to the US government. It doesn't matter whether the US government is a friend or a foe, that makes jurisdictions and national companies very nervous. So I think that's the reason, but that does leave a hole there, because at the moment, in the EU, for example, I think they've set aside some capital for developing an AI solution, and there are AI factories and gigafactories being talked about, but it's still relatively small. Tens of billions, but still relatively small. So there is a question that actually there is a bit of a gap in terms of a single supplier, because governments can mandate stuff, they can provide the stick, but they're not so good at the carrot, which is providing funding to make this happen. So it does require some degree of federation or partnership, which obviously slows things down. Is that fair?
If I may add, and I think let's look at it from the end customer's lens, right? So let's say I am the customer and I want to go across and look at AI-enabled autonomous driving, right? And I've basically left my life to basically the car going across and doing it. And I know very well that my personal data, or potentially with a biometric access in the entire value chain, if I can be compromised on my data sovereignty, which the government as well as the sovereign telco provider of that land is not authentically confirming to me, an individual would be scared in going across and leveraging AI to go across and misdirect, or potentially be vulnerable to go across and be the consumer of those kind of AI driven experiences, essentially. So the compelling driver in my mind for two authentic reasons is that everyone who would want to consume the genuine AI driven experiential lifestyle change will demand from both the government as well as the government empowered telcos to go across and render those authentic services. Otherwise, those services should not be even given in the land. The second is that ultimately the cost of doing it will require a lot of pivoting with not just the hyperscaler based GPUs as a service, right? You will need to go across and create these new AI data factories in the sovereign capacity. And to the point that Joe was mentioning, and what I was also saying, how will you go across and have an energy provision and make it cost optimal? The governments will have to go across and subsidize. So the traditional cloud native hyperscalers is not what is going to capacitate the experiences that you're trying to drive for the future. And if you've got to go across and evolve a new AI data factory, then in that case, there will have to be government subsidies, at least on energy, essentially, and a lot of collaboration and partnership that will have to be done by the telcos in going across and investing that to make it cost effective for the consumers. If that makes sense to you.
I mean, I get, yeah, and I guess the other thing that's the carrot side. I guess the stick side is the governments can regulate and require a sovereignty solution, and in that instance, you know, obviously it has a higher cost than a bog standard cloud solution, and it's left to the consumer, the enterprise, to pick up that additional cost of a sovereign solution versus a cloud solution. So you've got, from a government perspective, you've got a bit of a carrot and stick play here. One is you can put some incentives down with subsidies, and on the other is you regulate and say in certain industries, healthcare, government, maybe and so on, they are critical infrastructure, and therefore you have to have a sovereign solution that has to be certified in some way. We talked a lot about different roles for telcos. Where do you see, and have you got any examples of, you know, companies where you can talk a little bit about what the telco has chosen to do and what was driving that and where they chose to partner? It'd be great to get some thoughts on that. Maybe kick off with you, Abhishek.
Sure. I think from an overall perspective, and I think we've all been hearing telcos becoming techcos, and to me, actually, that's something which they've become extremely invested as well as authentic in. They are no more just the dumb pipe connectivity providers, with due respect to all my telco customers. They've actually evolved to going across and ensuring that they are selling experiences. Now, to me, one of the pivoting paths or catalyst for that matter is that how do you go across and do AI delivered right with scale, agility, to the point that Joe was also mentioning, and ensuring that it is genuine as well as delivering on actual outcomes for transforming the end customer's experience and digital lifestyle. Now, that is actually the power of the consumer base that the telcos have, right? So if we were to just look at it from a perspective that either social media has that much followers or actually the telcos have those many followers, hyperscalers, with due respect, actually don't have that followers per se, right? Which is the subscribers, essentially. Now, telcos having that credibility of going across and saying, I can genuinely go across and elevate my game, is the path that all, if not most of the tier one telcos have already taken. We are obviously privy to all the investments and transformations and even the ways of working that they are going across and transforming, right? To remain authentic to that commitment towards their customers. So to me, that is the power of what we are actually seeing on the way telcos are going to serve even better to the subscribers, because they genuinely have taken the path of being techcos. They are genuinely taking a path of investing towards user experiences as well as changing the digital lifestyle of all the people like us.
I think just to add to that, I think, you know, be the more techco route where you are innovating across both infrastructure and service layers, it's not the only approach to realizing kind of a telco value story for sovereign AI. There are value stories which are very much focused on the infrastructure, the interconnect. There are value stories that are very much focused on the services layer that sits right at the top of that value chain. So it's not that telcos necessarily need to take the techco approach in terms of looking across everything. There's still, very much an infrastructure focused approach. There's a services focused approach. You know, you can find your right niche that works for your market, your business. There's still value to be driven, but that's very dependent on the company and the market.
The bigger players may be able to do across the piece, but others may pick particular areas to focus on.
I think, sorry, I just wanted to add to Joe's comment. You're absolutely right, Joe. When I mentioned the ways of working that the telcos are actually transforming, which is where they are actually getting more dependent and collaborated with service integrators like us, and to the point that I was making earlier, that the skills gap as well as the scale gap is where the telcos, what they used to do in-house, they've already pivoted to going across and collaborating and finding better ways of engaging and partnering with SIs than actually treating us as just subcontractors. So that's actually the behind the scene of how they are elevating the game as services providers and solutions providers than actually just infrastructure providers. But yeah, you're right.
I would like to add, so the collaboration in that aspect, it's related to the, let's say, when we are talking about AI, it's related to the data, and the models and all of the services that they will be able to propose. So the applications are on top of anything, or the services. So I think it will start with the sectors that need that, like public sector, financial services, healthcare, and stuff like that. This is the low-hanging fruit, because it can be just the data and certification of software. I mean, what they will provide, and of course, the network part is also very important. Someone here mentioned security, and cybersecurity. I would say critical is not enough. It's like a critical, three time critical. It's all of the things. So if you're
foundational,
foundational, so if your defense or national security is being hacked, I don't know even what to say about it. It's anything. Anything is. The citizens are in a big problem. You are in the news in 1 second. Okay, so if yesterday, if your cellular network is dead, you are in the news at the evening. Now you are in the news right away, because the potential is even bigger. So telcos can take that role of keeping that data, that services secure, safe, and to expose them to in an ecosystem, a very secure ecosystem. Yeah, it's not going to be another hyperscaler. So it can be consumed by agencies, companies in that sector. They will have to do some certification also from their side. But the potential is huge. So the value they can bring to these customers, let's say, is huge. Also for the governments, and I mean, if you go to the public sector back again, the services they can bring to the citizens is huge. So you introduce AI to your daily life in not just GPT, let's say.
There's so much we could talk about. I'm just conscious of time. We promised we'd get people away before the top of the hour. There's been lots of questions. Ravi, Nagayet, Catherine, Sanjay, Dheeraj, very interesting question specifically about case studies in India. We will get back to you in writing with answers on those questions. Really appreciate your time and Red Hat for their support for this webinar, and look forward to seeing you again soon. But thank you very much for joining us, and that's all from us here, I think.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day. Thank you. Bye.